with an already niche market, now there are more and more people like me who are trying to find that diamond in the rough.
Welcome everyone to the Industrial Security Podcast. My name's Nate Nelson. I'm here as usual with Andrew Ginter, Vice President of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions. He's going to introduce the subject and the guest of today's show. Andrew, how's it going?
I'm very well, thank you, Nate. Our guest today is Meg Duba. She is the Senior Technical Recruiter for National and Homeland Security Directorates at Idaho National Labs. And we talked to Meg a couple of years ago about, the job market back then. I saw her face to face at the S4 event, the first really big industrial cybersecurity event since the pandemic. So I sat down with her and I asked her what's changed. There's been big changes in the economy. There's been, big changes post-pandemic. So, we caught up to see what's happening in the job market.
All right. Then without further ado, here's you and Meg Duba.
Hello, Meg, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, can you tell us a bit about yourself and about the good work that you're doing at Idaho National Labs?
Absolutely. So like most recruiters, I stumbled into this career field. I ended up finding out that it was super exciting, and offering people jobs is a feeling like no other. So being able to do this on a daily basis is definitely something that keeps me coming to work every day. The work that we're doing at Idaho National Lab, in very broad strokes, is we are keeping the nation's critical infrastructure safe.
So you said, feels really good to find people work. I can kind of echo that. We're here at S4, and yesterday at the mingle, I had a young man come up to me, say, Andrew, you know me from 2 years ago, and I'm going, I do. And he says, yes, you gave me a bunch of reading, you got me started, I got your books and a whole bunch of other reading. And he says, I was in school at the time, and now I'm working in the field. Thank you. And I'm going, well, you're welcome. I mean, and it does feel good. It's nice to be able to help people out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and it's not so much the statistic in corporate recruiting, but the type of recruiting I did prior to joining INL, started out with the temp, and then I did the staff augmentation, working with consultants. Recruiting is about 90% failure whenever you're working in those two separate areas. So you really have to live for that 10% of the time. So it does feel really good when someone comes up to you and thanks you. I actually ran into, now that you're bringing this up, I did run into somebody this event who I hired recently, who I had met at a previous event. So SFS, Scholarship for Service, is another event that we attend fairly regularly. And it's amazing. Like, the people coming out of that program are just absolutely stellar. But yes, I agree with you. It does feel really amazing to have somebody come up to you and thank you for your guidance and helping them find a job.
And so to our topic, you're a recruiter, you're an expert on the job market. I'm interested in the OT security market. We spoke a couple of years ago. Can you talk about what's changed? I mean, are you having to work harder or less hard to find qualified talent? In your own organization or in the rest of the world, is there more or less demand for this kind of talent in the OT security space, the industrial security space, than we saw the last time we spoke?
I definitely would say that it's getting harder. There is a lot more public knowledge, it seems. I mean, maybe just in my arena, I'm definitely not technical, but it seems like there is more public knowledge on the potential issues that could come with any of the critical infrastructure being compromised. So because of that, there are more and more companies that are doing what we are doing in the private sector. So with an already niche market, with a seemingly small and shallow pool from which to choose, now there are more and more people like me who are trying to find that diamond in the rough. So I would definitely say it's become more difficult rather than the other way around.
Andrew, I already had some awareness that the recruiting for talent in this field is particularly difficult. But what Meg just said is that the problem is actually getting worse. And I'm wondering, the nature of the work isn't any different today than it would have been a few years ago. Why is this becoming an even more intractable problem?
Well, I'm not sure I know exactly, why things are the way they are today. I've got a couple of factors I can throw in there. I know that in many geographies, the big fish, we're talking Google and Amazon and Microsoft, they open a big office and they suck up literally 5,000 and 10,000 people at a go in all aspects of the work, from, the technical to the marketing to you name it. And, to Meg's point, awareness of OT cyber risk is very much increasing. Attacks are increasing. Downtime is increasing. So, yeah, there's an increased demand for this specialization in a context where, technical people and other people are in high demand. And, from personal experience, Waterfall has more positions open on our website than we've ever had in our history by a large margin. So, we're suffering here as well. So I can see that there's a problem. And I think it's particularly acute in the industrial security space.
And so does that mean that finding jobs in this space is so simple? Because it seems to me that whenever I hear from the opposite perspective, that even though there are many jobs available, it isn't always necessarily super easy to find the right one.
Well, that was actually the next question I asked Meg. I said, we've talked about how hard it is to find people. Let's talk about where the jobs are. So let's go back to Meg. Another data point I had from a couple of years ago was, I would work reasonably routinely with students. I was teaching a graduate course at Michigan Technological University for a couple of years. And, they would all ask me, when we're done this course, when I have this training, where can I find work? And I would look around, and it would usually be a little bit hard to find something local because, in my estimation, and this is a back of the envelope calculation, I'm guessing there's, compared to the number of people in the world doing IT security, there's maybe 2% of that number doing industrial security. Mm-hmm. And so the sense I had was that, if you were moving between jobs, you might have to move cities. There might not be something local. Can you talk about locality? I mean, you're pulling people from all over the country, but, does there tend to be sort of a local market for these folks, or do people in this specialization sort of have to get used to the idea that if they're going to switch jobs, they might have to switch cities?
I would definitely say, yeah. I think that it would be something that one should prepare themselves for if they wanted to make the bigger jumps in their career. Definitely be prepared to move. The beautiful thing is that today, tenure at any position looks to be about 2 years. Long gone are the days when people stayed at the same jobs for 20 or 30 years until retirement. When I look at resumes these days, if somebody's been at the same job for 2, ideally 3 years, I do consider that a decent amount of time. And so if you are considering moving to a different location, just understand that it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. You can go to a certain place, get some really good experience, and then take that experience and go to a different company. One of our managers used to really want students, as they were coming out of college, to go to one of the different national labs first. That way they had a much better idea of the difference between what we had to offer versus what other areas had to offer. So to go to the first part of your question, though, do we have people that we choose from locally? We do, and we are working with some of the local universities to help build and create their curriculum to have a focus more specifically on what we do. We started understanding that a while ago that we're going to have to start a lot earlier in people's careers if we want to build the next generation of OT specialists, OT experts.
The sense that I've had historically is that there's more to learn on the OT side than the IT side. But, I live on the OT side, so I'm not sure that is accurate. But you put job recs together for the OT side. I understand you occasionally do that on the IT side. Do you have to know more? I mean, do I need an engineering degree as well as a comp sci or a computer security degree in order to be credible in the space? Or, is there, can mere mortals stand a chance?
Well, it does seem to me that with the OT space, a lot more of the people are learning this actually in school and in programs where they can actually get the hands-on experience. With the IT side, since a lot of it is more programming and computer-based and with the different languages that you can a lot of times get for free, it does seem like their opportunity to learn more does seem a little bit greater than on the OT side of the fence.
Okay, and we're here at S4 again. I'm circulating. I talk to people. I learn a little bit about their background. There's a fair number of people here with a military background who came out of the military and said, critical infrastructure needs protection, physically and cyber-wise, and either wound up working for the owner and operator of some critical infrastructure facilities, or wound up working for a service provider that provided cybersecurity services to those facilities. How much of that do you see? Is a military background a real advantage in this space?
I would say so. Yeah, absolutely. First off, not only is the knowledge there, but you also understand the kind of the headache that it takes to get a clearance, which is a large part of what we require at the lab. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of the people we do hire in our critical infrastructure support areas do come from a military background. Yeah, we actually have 2 positions open right now. One of them we keep open all year round for a critical infrastructure analyst, and another one we actually have for the department manager over the critical infrastructure analysts. The manager who's in that position right now actually was an MP in the Army.
And I'm curious, why do you keep these positions open constantly, or do you just have that many people in that role that you need to hire?
We just need that many people. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the fact that there's only one position there, that might actually represent sort of a constant stream of hiring on your part.
Absolutely. Yep. And an easy way to define that is if you look on our website, you can actually see that there are expiration dates next to the job postings. If you come across one of the job postings under the National and Homeland Security Directorate and it doesn't have an expiration date, that's one of those positions that we need so badly that we keep open all year round.
So job postings, let's talk about the postings for a second. Look for the expiration date. There's other requirements in the posting. How perfect a fit do we need to be considered for one of these postings?
Well, whenever the job postings initially go out, the idea is that the person needs to meet 100% of the requirements. And then the longer the posting stays out, the more realistic we all have to become in determining what can stay and what can go. So what I will typically do with the managers is ask them, okay, let's talk about the top 3 things that are incredibly important to this position. Kind of looking at it like a 3-legged stool. I hate that analogy because so many people use it, but it is what it is. And of this 3-pronged approach, which one of these areas is the least important to the stability of this role? So for example, I have a position out right now. It's not in the OT space, but just as an example, a wireless security researcher. So they need to have some embedded software engineering experience. They need to have experience in wireless, and they need to have experience in cyber. So of those things, the cyber and the wireless, if we can find somebody who is interested in getting into one of those two spaces, but they have a really strong foundation in embedded software programming, then I can take them to the manager and he will look at them. When that job posted, that was not an option, right? So what we try to do is we try to find people who are close enough to what the job is looking for, and what I will typically have to do is kind of liaise between the candidate and the manager and try to create some sort of understanding between the two that this person can learn what you need them to, and this manager will teach what you need to learn, and create more of a symbiotic relationship. But it does require a little extra work.
Did you know that power plants are exempt from 1/4 of NERC requirements when those plants use Waterfall's unidirectional security gateways? NERC does not demand that power plants use the gateways, but the regulations recognize the strength of unidirectional protections. The regulations reward sites who use gateways by dramatically reducing the number of security rules for those plants. For details on the exemptions, please download Waterfall's latest report on the NERC standards. You can find the report on the waterfall-security.com website in the Resources tab under eBooks and White Papers.
So, Nate, I'm talking to Meg at S4. Let me give just a little context here. I think it's not just demand that's increasing. I think supply is increasing as well. S4, was canceled last year. This year it was like 800 people. Last year, as I recall, it was 600. So we're talking a 1/3, a 33% increase. The pandemic has changed things, but I was talking to some folks at another conference provider. I won't name names. They were projecting 300 people to show up to their conference. And it was a hybrid conference. So you could sign up for in-person or you could sign up for virtual. They said they had close to 10,000 signups on the virtual side. And I've just never seen that. There is no industrial security conference with 10,000 attendees. Now there is. So it seems like, there's an enormous, a rapidly growing pool of talent in the field because there's such interest in the space.
So then how does that accord with what we've been hearing from Meg this whole time? If there's so many more people applying for these jobs, why is it still so hard to find people for these jobs?
Well, I think that speaks to Meg's first point about the growing demand. If we see interest in the field, if we arguably see supply of people in the field increasing dramatically, and still we can't find anyone, that says to me the demand is increasing even more dramatically. And maybe that makes sense in the face of, we saw, 2.5 times as many ransomware attacks with physical outages, in 2021 versus 2020. We've seen a lot more near misses. We've seen the conflict in the Ukraine. It might be that, the supply is increasing. Demand is increasing even faster. The demand is just exploding. You obviously work with a lot of candidates. Can we turn it around for a second? Do you have advice for people who are, let's say, coming out of school with some kind of credible background in the field and are trying to land their first job, or even down the road, people who is the advice any different for people who might have 5 years experience and are looking for a change? Is there advice you can give to job seekers?
Well, I think that we should never underestimate the power of a handshake in a face-to-face conversation. And because of that, putting yourself out there is incredibly important. These types of events that we are at right now are priceless, particularly in the cybersecurity arena, because people in this field are generally paranoid by nature. So if you're trying to contact somebody via a phone call from a number they don't recognize, or from an email from an address they don't recognize, you're going to be much less likely to get a response than if you meet with somebody face-to-face. And the same thing goes for recruiters. Recruiters are getting bombarded constantly by people who are interested in breaking into a field, or they have questions. And it's going to be much easier for a job applicant to get really valuable information, not just about the job, but about the company, about the culture, if they can meet with somebody face-to-face. Advice on people coming fresh out of school is the exact same for people who have years of experience. If you're interested in getting into a company, if you're interested in finding a position, never underestimate the power of a good attitude. What a lot of interviewers are doing whenever they're meeting with you is they are psychologically breaking down what it's going to be like sitting next to you for 40 hours a week, or communicating with you for 40 hours a week. And if there is some sort of a red or a yellow flag that this person's going to be difficult to get along with, regardless if they have all the experience in the world, it's going to be very difficult for us to see ourselves hiring you. And I, as the gatekeeper, do a pretty diligent job on making sure that I protect the nature of my teams. They get along really well, and I think that we do a really good job of hiring positive attitudes and then teaching the skills where we need to, versus hiring brilliant jerks who know everything but just don't get along with anybody. And that can really poison an environment quickly.
It seems to me that what Meg is describing there is where the real art of hiring is, because on one hand, I totally understand where she's coming from. If you're going to be interacting with someone for 40 hours a week, you better make sure that they get along with you and your team and everybody, that they really fit into a unit. On the other hand, there's so much difficulty involved in here. You could get off on the wrong foot with somebody and not end up hiring them for the wrong reasons. It could be that the interviewer and the interviewee just are different kinds of people, come from different walks of life. There's obviously an element of potential of discrimination here. Even if you're well-intentioned, if two people are coming from different parts of the world, it might be that they don't quite vibe, and then suddenly somebody doesn't get a job for all of the wrong reasons. So I imagine that Meg must be hyper aware of these issues to do a good job.
Very much so. And, in my experience, the HR people of the world, the people who do Meg's job, are very good at figuring out sort of personalities and fits. This is part of their job. They study this, they practice this. I know I'm much worse at it, but I will add as well that there's other factors. So, for example, if you bring somebody in who is headstrong, who's not going to listen to other people, who's my way or the highway, well, if they're actually head and shoulders and a bit above everybody else in terms of the quality of their decision making, well, maybe we should all follow these people. If in fact they're not, now you just have a problem, because you're getting bad decisions made because the new person is not listening to other inputs and not learning from other people's experiences and mistakes. So there's more to it than just, is there a good fit? You've got to look as well as how capable is this person compared to the rest of the group. There's other factors as well. So, for example, your salespeople, you need them. The role matters. That you need them to be more headstrong. You need them to be more stubborn, more persistent. Otherwise, the prospect says, "Thanks, go away," click. And they give up because, well, clearly the prospect doesn't need me. I can't ignore his input or her input. But when in fact, if they'd been a little more stubborn, a little more persistent, the second or third time, the prospect would say, maybe you do have something there. Maybe I do need to talk to you, because it's beginning to sound useful, what you're telling me. And you wind up with a sale. So, and in the security space, penetration testers are sort of an animal unto themselves. They tend to be loners. They tend to have an attitude. Their job is to break everything. They tend to be the successful ones tend to be extremely technical. And they don't get along nicely with others, but in a sense, they don't have to. So yeah, it's complicated. And, I know in my job, I rely on our HR team to do some of this figuring out for me, because in my experience, they're much better at it than I am.
And with regards to sales, I actually completely agree with you, because that is a person-to-person kind of job. I'm just wondering if, when it comes to, the technical folks, the engineers that are involved, whether it would be much more difficult to evaluate a good engineer, especially because, frankly, a lot of engineers spend a lot of time on computers and not necessarily talking to people. Are you going to get the best impression of them in an interview process?
I think you're reflecting sort of a common misunderstanding of the engineering role. Engineers, as a rule, are not loners. In the cybersecurity space at Idaho National Labs, in Waterfall, everywhere that I've worked, the technical space is so big and so complicated. You have to cooperate with other people. I mean, when I was doing software development, we had teams of software developers. You didn't give everybody some code and say, "Here, go write it," and then try and glue it together at the end. It'd be a disaster. you had to be cooperating in terms of what kind of information are we moving around? How's it moving around? You negotiate the boundaries, you negotiate the interfaces. There's a lot of back and forth. And the same thing as if you're designing a complex network, if you're designing a complex testing procedure, you're going to break it up into 5 different people. You've got boundaries between the job each of them is doing. There's a lot of intercommunication. And again, if you have an individual who's in there saying my way or the highway, they're blind to the good ideas of the rest of the team. You wind up with chaos. You wind up with, suboptimal results. So no, the engineering profession in the modern world tends to be much more cooperative than people give it credit for. Okay, we're kind of drifting into advice for job seekers, but we'll drift if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I just heard you say that if we have people who are currently apparently an imperfect fit for a posting, but it's a really attractive posting to them, you're looking at a resume. How can you sort of see the potential in a candidate from the resume? What do you look for in the resume?
So advice that I give to people who ask this question is, well, first off, you need to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the person on the other side of the computer. I'm going through thousands of these a month, so what you add on there needs to be very pertinent to the position that I am currently trying to fill. So the advice that I typically give to people, first off, don't send a blanket resume. That's definitely a way to shoot yourself in the foot very quickly. Use the same verbiage, the same terminology that you see on the resume. There might be synonyms that are used within the industry, but somebody like me might not know what those synonyms are. So make sure that you call out the very specific details as it's listed on the job description itself. And what I always tell people too is make sure that whenever you are formulating your resume, ensure that the detail that you are including is what is on the description in the same chronological order. Because normally whenever we are posting jobs, we're putting what's the most important to us at the very top and then descending as we go down through the bullets. So if you're doing yours in reverse order, chances are we might not see that connection. And what your job as a seeker is to make me see that connection. And make it as easy on me as possible, because sometimes I go cross-eyed looking at so many resumes.
So that's advice that's sort of independent of the industrial security space, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know that historically, last time I was looking for work 10, 15 years ago, I put my resume out there. I listed my experience and qualifications in sort of reverse chronological order. The most recent stuff first, the oldest stuff last. And sent that in for all of the opportunities I was pursuing. But what I'm hearing here is, look, you've got to make the job easy on the recruiter. Rearrange your resume. If their number one priority is something you did 5 years ago, mention that first. Or, what I used to do was send out a covering letter, because I was told you always have to send a covering letter. So I'd send a covering letter that says, polite things and nothing useful. Maybe the other approach is to send a covering letter that says, okay, I've got a chronological resume here, but let me connect that resume to your needs and hit their needs in the order that they need it. You've got to bridge that gap is what I'm hearing from Meg, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when I was last looking for work, I got pretty well versed in the art of deleting things from my resume, which I think is an underrated, I wouldn't call it skill, but I'm aware that for people like Meg, you have a stack of papers and they all look the same and you're running on coffee, and the last thing you want to do is read, frankly, a chronological and polite resume and cover letter. So getting to the point, a resume is a statement like any other statement. You want to get to the point straight away. The only reason that I can think of to have a lot of things or things that aren't relevant is if you want to surprise somebody. If you want Meg to know that you're much more than whatever she's looking for, then maybe you throw something in there that doesn't necessarily relate to the job. But like anything else in life, you want people to know exactly what you're trying to say when you want to say it right away.
Well, this has been great, Meg. Thank you for joining us. Before we let you go, is there a thought you'd like to leave with our listeners?
There is definitely a lot more competition these days with the market the way it is. It is a candidate-driven market. There is no doubt about that. What I will tell people is that if you will consider working at Idaho National Lab, we can teach you things that private industry can't, won't, or shouldn't. So I would definitely take a chance, even though it is in snowy Idaho Falls. 2 to 3 years to build your resume is not going to be the end of the world, and it might end up being the best decision you've ever made for your career. We also have a really amazing suite of benefits. We're off every other Friday. We accrue almost 4 weeks of vacation the very first year you start. We have up to a 15% yield on 401k. So it's definitely a phenomenal place to grow your career. And heck, we'd love to have you stay too.
So that was your interview with Meg Duba at S4. Andrew, you want to take us out with something?
Sure. I mean, my takeaway is that demand has skyrocketed. Supply has increased, but demand in this space for people has skyrocketed. But, still it is a niche, compared to the IT space or the IT security space. And so even though there's enormous demand, to find sort of the right fit for, what you're looking for, you might have to move. You might have to move to another city. It's that small a space still comparatively, even if it's much bigger than it was 3 years ago.
Actually, to that point, Andrew, I totally get why engineers working with sensitive source code or sensitive control systems would have to move to work at an industrial security kind of setting. But aren't there also a lot of other kinds of positions that you could theoretically in a post-COVID world do remotely?
In theory, yes. I guess the short answer is yes. You can do some of this stuff remotely if you're, helping configure stuff. If you're working on something technical, I imagine you can do it remotely. But I know that a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is in person as well. I mean, incident response. Help, my machine's infected. Oh, look, the neighbor's is infected. A lot of that cleanup has to be done locally because you got to touch the machine, unplug it, take a forensic image, erase it, restore from backup. It's a lot of hands-on. They call these teams flyaway teams for a reason, because you tell the people, quick, pull the breaker, shut everything off. I'll be there in 3 hours, and you get on an emergency taxi to the airport. And to your point, some of this stuff is sensitive. I know some of the work that Idaho National Labs does requires a security clearance, and you just can't handle classified material over the internet remotely. It doesn't work. And if you're a service provider, if you're working for a business that an engineering consulting firm or a security consulting firm, you might be able to do some of that work remotely or in your local office, but you should have the expectation that you're going to have to get on an airplane fairly frequently, in the post-pandemic era, and go and meet people and, face-to-face planning meetings. A lot of planning is way easier to do face-to-face than it is remotely. It's across the board. I mean, penetration testers, maybe you could do that remotely, some of it at least, the sort of the black box where you're breaking into an organization from the outside in. Well, you're coming across the internet. I suppose, you could do that remotely. I know that, I work remotely at Waterfall. I'm here in North America. The head office is in Israel. Frankly, I miss being in the office. When I visit the office the few times a year I'm able to, I just get so much done. I mean, you can solve a problem in 5 minutes while you're waiting in line at the coffee machine, and you just can't do that remotely. You've got to schedule a call across 9 time zones. I miss working in the office. And Meg did not give her contact info, but I know she wanted to. So if anybody wants to reach out to Meg Duba, you can see what jobs are posted at inl.gov, IdahoNationalLabs.gov, or reach out to Meg on LinkedIn. She is Meg Duba, Megduba.
Well, then with that, thanks to Meg for speaking with you, Andrew. And as always, Andrew, thank you for speaking with me.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Nate.
This has been the Industrial Security Podcast from Waterfall. Thanks to everybody out there listening.